that I guess sometime in like the 60s started to kind of shift from, maybe a more moneyed neighborhood to kind of turning into like high crime and that sort of thing. So he's living in this sort of crumbling, decaying mansion, throwing lots of money at the repairs and trying to get it, back where it needs to be. And I guess he's just getting really frustrated with that. People described his home as being furnished with these like big dramatic Baroque pieces of furniture. And there was some theater in Chicago that had gone under, and he went in and like bought all of the decor in this theater. So it was just really dramatic.
Lots of velvet.
He's a really dramatic guy. As I said, he did drama, in college and was into performance art and just really eccentric. So he had this big home full of fancy, like funky antiques and that kind of thing. And as I mentioned, he was the accomplished harp player, which, you don't hear about that every day. So in 1975, when all of his kids were basically grown and out of the house, I guess he's got the empty nest, he and his partner Joey decided to purchase some land. And they looked for land in the South, and they found some land in Chattooga County, Georgia, which, as we mentioned, this manor is going to be built in Somerville. And he ended up buying 40 acres. And this is uncleared property. Basically, it was just 40 acres of rough-ass woods.
Yeah, so totally raw, untouched.
Yeah.
Ready to go.
Some serious logging, no water, electric, sewer, none of that. I mean, it's just, it's basically just forest land. So he purchased this 40 acres. And on his 50th birthday, he resigned from Loyola and moved to the land in Georgia, giving up most of his worldly possessions. So, just sold everything, moved. He was just ready to get off the grid. He was tired of, slaving away in a lab, working at this college, paying all this money out for taxes, bills, this mansion that he's got to maintain, and now his kids are all gone, and he's,
And all the while, the neighborhood's changing. He doesn't seem to like it, the way it's changing. And he's just ready to get away from the rat race. Which
a lot of people do. And that's one of the attractions of the mountains in this region. A lot of people just want to get away from that busy lifestyle and have a breath of fresh air.
He wants to go logging with his boyfriend in the woods of North Georgia.
Paul Bunyan.
That was a double entendre. Nobody?
I'm just...
Okay.
I'm just ignoring you.
Let's do this. Somebody out there got that. They'll get it.
Okay. Enough, Dylan. So, back to the story. Buys this land, sells all of his things, ends up moving down to Georgia. He and Joey lived in a camper basically for 2 years while they hand-built their home and, tore down trees, cut down trees.
So they're making their own wood and everything?
So 2 years it took them because they did all this work by hand.
That's pretty awesome if you really think about it. I mean, even, that is awesome.
And it took them 45,000 bricks to build this home. Scudder even wrote an article for the March-April 1981 edition of Mother Earth News about the hand-built home that they ended up naming Corpsewood Manor. And it was pretty interesting how they got that name. They said that when they arrived there, it was winter. I guess there was snow on the ground. The trees were all dead. And so all of these, creaky, trees are, blowing in the wind and whatever, and then it looked like something out of a horror movie. So they called it Corpsewood Manor. And they actually lived on, I think it was called Dead Horse Road, because when they first pulled up, there was a dead horse on the side of the road.
That is awesome.
And that was the first thing they saw when they pulled up to their property. So they ended up naming that road Dead Horse Road.
That's just
so these guys had a wacky sense of humor.
Colorful story.
Because I'm that sounds like something that, we would do. Dead Horse Road. Anyway, Scudder, Joey, and their 2 English Mastiffs lived in this, quote-unquote mansion, mini mansion, if you will. But it had, a pink gargoyle kind of at the top of the house that overlooked Joey's rose garden. Apparently, Joey was quite the gardener. They had no electricity, no running water. They used a wood stove for cooking. They had a kerosene refrigerator, and they used a chemical toilet. So they are really living off the grid. And they're doing some homesteading as well. They had a big garden. They had grapevines, fruit trees. They eventually got chickens. And they even ground their own flour and started doing some beekeeping.
Wow.
Yeah. They became known as this sort of, quirky, fun couple in town. I mean, of course, it was the 70s into the early 80s. Rural North Georgia, a lot of people would whisper. There was a lot of gossip and rumors about them. But then once people kind of got to know them, neighbors and whatnot, they made a lot of friends. They would entertain quite often. People said that Joey was a really great cook. And, they would invite folks over for dinner. They would serve them. Dr. Scudder had began making wine because he had these muscadine grapes. So he would make all this muscadine wine, and he was kind of known as the winemaker, and he was really hospitable, and they were really great hosts and would invite people over to have wine. And so everybody knew, like, if you get an invite to Scudder's, you're going to get to go have some wine with him.
Great food cooked on a wood stove.
Send you home with wine.
Yeah.
So it just sounds like that they were just fun-loving kind of people. Easygoing, The house itself, as I mentioned, kind of a mini mansion, but maybe kind of a crude version of a mini mansion brick house. The house was decorated with a lot of art, and this art specifically was like satanic art. He had a lot of sigils because Dr. Scudder enjoyed art, creating, that kind of thing. So he would make stained glass pieces. I'm
not sure, and I'm sure some other people might want to know, what's a sigil? Sigil.
Well, now you've got me on the spot, Dylan.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought. Well, yeah. Oh.
Well, I mean, like,
isn't that is that symbols?
Symbols.
Okay.
Like, usually in the
that's what I thought.
The occult community. I know. I'm just like, do I need to give you like a definition? They're like symbols in the occult community that represent different things, and in a lot of black magic and spell casting and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Sigils are often used as part of spells and that sort of thing. And so, Dr. Scudder. This brings us to the point that Dr. Scudder was really interested in the occult, and actually became a card-carrying member of the Church of Satan. And now some folks dispute that he wasn't really like a Satanist, that he was just an atheist, but he was such a curious, inquisitive kind of person.
Right.
That he joined because he just wanted more information, wanted to know what they were about, and he had this fascination with like this black magic,
symbolism, things, yeah.
Yeah, he just thought it was interesting and, wanted to kind of dabble in it just really more for like the thrill and the philosophical side of it, that kind of thing. But, a lot of people also don't understand that Satanism is not a belief in like supernatural kinds of powers. So there are a lot of people who are atheists that kind of fall into Satanism because it's not like there's a supernatural good and evil kind of concept.
Yeah. See, I was wondering if he was the, nowadays they have the more, the one based on like math, and it's more of a political movement and science. And then they have the, like Crowley.
Right, and this was like
old school.
Right, and this was Church of Satan, so this was a LaVeyan.
So this would be LaVeyan, okay.
And so we had the house decorated with a lot of art, sigils, pentagrams. As I mentioned, he had this big gargoyle statue, which was painted pink.
Yeah, he probably enjoyed all that as well, with just the shock, because, especially back then, and leading into the 80s, we had the satanic panic then, that just people see these symbols, they're not familiar with them, and they're scared, So he probably enjoyed all that, all those symbols and things just because it freaked people out, because he liked them, make them weird.
Well,
weird them out.
Again, he was kind of into that shock factor. And then there are also some photos, which I'll post on our Patreon page, of items inside the house. I mean, he had a lot of antiques. He had a bed that was beautiful, kind of like a big sleigh bed. But in the headboard, it was like carved with these kind of gruesome, demonic-looking, satanic kind of faces.
Wow.
So he just really liked that kind of art and used much of that to influence, his decor throughout Corpsewood Manor. Well, on November 1982, there was a 17-year-old boy named Avery Brock, and he was out deer hunting on the property. I guess not really paying attention to the fact that, this is owned by someone. So he's trespassing, he's hunting. But, Dr. Scudder and Joey were pretty laid back about stuff, so they weren't really annoyed when they found him deer hunting on the property. They actually were quite the opposite. They were very cordial. They offered him wine. They invited him in to the house to hang out. And so he kind of became like a friend and began sort of coming over to the house, hanging out, enjoying the wine, enjoying good company.
So he stumbled upon some friends, interesting, quirky friends, I'm sure.
I should preface this also with, so there was the main house, which was the brick house where they lived. Then they had what they called the chicken house. And that sounds like a brothel, but it was like a 2-story kind of building. And the top floor, they called the pink room.
Hey.
Yeah, well, it was because someone had given them some paint, like extra paint, and it just happened to be pink, so they just didn't give a shit, and they painted this room pink.
That's perfect.
But I guess the pink room is where they entertained guests because they didn't allow people into the actual home, like where they lived.
Okay.
For whatever reason. So anytime they would have guests over, friends over, they only entertained them in this pink room, which supposedly only really housed like a few mattresses and like a space heater and just a couple things like that.
So it was like a literal chicken house and they added to it.
Yeah. So this is like kind of a party pad, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds like more of a clubhouse kind of thing.
So this is where the guests would hang out. So when Avery Brock would come over, hang out, drink wine, chill, he would hang out in the pink room and never once went inside the manor. There's been some insinuation that Avery Brock, Scudder, and Joey had some kind of sexual relationship going on. That Avery had been intimate with both Scudder and Joey, and maybe even both together kind of thing. And there was even some rumor that there might have been like maybe some money exchanged. So almost like Brock might have been kind of working as a John almost, or that Scudder kind of offered him money in exchange for sexual favors and he kind of agreed to it. That sort of situation.
So Scudder and Joey are the Johns.
Well, yeah.
So here's this guy's like, oh, I'm just hunting deer, guys. What's up? And next thing you know, he's got all their money.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's some of the rumor, but I don't know.
Could you see it like a flannel, like cut off sleeves?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, there was some insinuation that Brock, Scudder, and Joey had these sexual encounters, and so one evening, Avery decided to bring his friend Tony West over to hang out. And now, Tony West was a career criminal who spent a lot of time in and out of jail. And Tony had actually just been released for serving a stint because he had shot his uncle in the back during a poker game.
Yay.
Because his uncle pissed him off, shoots his uncle. But this guy's been in and out of jail basically his whole life, like since he was an early teen. Just kind of a troublemaker, you know, always into something. And so when Brock was telling Tony West about these new friends, he was like, you know, hey, we're going to go hang out with these folks. They're gay devil worshippers, you know, and so that's how he would talk about, oh, they're these gay devil worshippers, just on and on. And so, you know, Scudder was involved with the Church of Satan, but again, you know, who's to say if he was really super into it or if it was more of just kind of like a study or something to kind of shock people. The two men started hanging out over at Corpsewood, but they were, of course, only allowed up in the pink room. And one night in particular, they're partying and drinking wine and whatever. West passes out only to wake up and find his friend Avery Brock and Scudder engaged in an intimate situation.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And Brock was really embarrassed about this. He was so embarrassed by what had happened. You know, quickly began stating he wasn't homosexual. It's not what you think.
Sleepwalking.
Exactly.
Sleepcocking.
Okay, Dylan.
How you knew that was a natural. That was natural. That had to happen.
I'm going to give you a hard no on that.
Okay.
See what I did there? Hard, but okay.
Hey, if you're asleep, you can't control it.
Oh my God. Okay. You each keep your thoughts to yourself. So Brock was embarrassed. You know, he's not homosexual, and began to tell West he had been taken advantage of. Oh, well, they got me drunk and made me do this. I think he drugged me. This was not consensual.
Like an hour, 45 minutes later, I was like, you've got to stop, guys.
Well, West and Avery began to, you know, talk about the situation, talk about these two, quote unquote, like weird guys out in the woods. I mean, the fact that they were homosexual coupled with they're Satanists and they live in this weird house and they're just oddballs. And, here this Scudder is like forcing himself upon you and you're only 17 and all this. Wes decided that Scudder needed to die. That was the conclusion that he came up with. And so Avery